Good morning and welcome back to the Capitol. I'm State Senator Andrew Chesney, and joining me this morning is Senator Dave Syverson, Leader and Representative John Cabello, and Representative Joe Sosnowski. In November, you may recall that Governor Pritzker announced an additional $160 million to combat the migrant crisis. In fact, it is certainly a crisis. This is on top of the $478 million that the Democrats have already allocated to address this issue. Of the $160 million, $30 million was to take a large intake center and a welcome center to coordinate with the newly arrived migrants. We have $65 million that was allocated to the city of Chicago to open up climate-controlled shelters. That actually equates to address 2,000 migrants, equates to about $32,500 per migrant for just 6 months. $65 million to address the wraparound services to make sure that the migrants are comfortable during their time here in Illinois. We had an experience in the Rockford and the Greater State Line area on New Year's Eve when 355 migrants arrived in the Chicago Rockford International Airport. This plane arrived with little notice, and local officials were scrambling to address the issue. But they did so very well. We commend the great efforts of Winnebago County Sheriff Gary Caruana and his team for addressing the issue with the final destination of what we believe to be is Chicago. The migrant crisis in the Rockford area created a lot of panic, a lot of confusion, and opened up a lot of questions that me and my colleagues want to try to address today. We've had calls from superintendents, we've seen newsletters from our superintendents that have spoke directly to the migrant and the migrant crisis in our schools and how the teachers and the administration has to deal with this crisis. Governor Pritzker and his allies in the General Assembly, Mayor Johnson, have rolled out the red carpet for the migrants. And so it's no surprise why a destination like Illinois would be of interest to them. We've passed laws like the Trust Act that make it almost impossible for local law enforcement to communicate with federal authorities. They can't even talk to them. Governor Pritzker and the Democrats have provided free health care for undocumented folks that are aged 52 and plus. And there's also debates that will probably be happening in the legislature this year to discuss offering free health care for all. State of Illinois, we offer driver's license for immigrants and migrants, free legal representation. We offer it all. Our staff and I are working on a legislative package with Senator Syverson, Sosnowski, Representative Sosnowski, and Cabello to try to address this issue because it really is a big issue. And here are some of the highlights of what we want to address today. We want to reverse the Trust Act so that local law enforcement can have conversations with federal authorities. We want to eliminate free health care for illegal immigrants. The best health care in the state of Illinois that J.B. Pritzker delivers is for illegal immigrants and also migrants after they stay past their 180 days. And we also need to focus on how to move folks along. You know, there's California, New York, and other states that may want to offer different services than the state of Illinois. And so we're going to have a few comments from those standing here. So I'd like to introduce Leader John Cabello, who has a few comments. Okay.
Good morning. I just wanted to talk a little bit on the Trust Act. As a law enforcement officer since 1993, I can tell you that it is just insane that you have one law enforcement agency not able to speak to another. And when we're looking at some of the worst coming to our country, being let in or coming in spots where they're not being caught, but then saying, oh, come on in. Well, we're welcoming you here to this state. For us to not be able to speak to ICE is, again, insane. So we need to repeal the Trust Act. At least we need to repeal that part, if not all of it. When you look at trying to take folks that came here illegally, and when law enforcement has a run-in with them, or they find these folks through a call that they came to, and to not be able to hold on to this person for a federal agency, puts our tax-paying citizens at risk. It puts everyone at risk, even the person that is here illegally. Once folks find out, we don't want any vigilantism, but what's going on in this country, I think we're going to start seeing that, where people start taking things into their own hands. Those are things that we have to make sure and try to get a handle on, and part of that is by repealing the Trust Act. So I'm hoping that people come to a table with level heads to understand that our job as elected officials is to protect those taxpayers that pay our salaries, that pay for everything under this dome. Many of those folks are having real tough times right now with the bills mounting on their table, trying to pay for health insurance. Yet you come here illegally and you get health insurance? That just doesn't make sense. In fact, it's wrong. When our folks are struggling to pay their bills, we are now paying for someone to have free health care? That should anger our citizens immensely. Elections have consequences, and you're seeing part of that now. So I'm going to turn it over to Senator Dave Syverson.
Thank you. I'm going to highlight and talk just a little bit about the healthcare side of the issue and the concerns that we have. As you know, last year in the budget, it was announced that there was this creation of this new healthcare plan that was going to help cover undocumenteds now from age 42 and older, providing them what is the finest health care in the country. It is better coverage than we give our own disabled, that we give our own low incomes families, and certainly much better coverage than what working families that have to pay premiums and co-pays and deductibles for their health coverage. It's a substantial amount. And the concern is that up until January, Illinois was the only state that provided unlimited health care. And so not only were we have millions crossing the borders into the states, but there are only 11 sanctuary states in the country. There's only 2 in the Midwest, Illinois and Colorado, and Illinois was the only state that provided that free health care. Now, January 1, California announced they're going to start providing health care, so that may give some relief. But not only is Illinois seeing this influx, but we are getting the sickest of the sick because we're the only state that covers for this broad health coverage. In the budget, they had talked about the cost being somewhere around $800 million just for the program for those age 42 and older. But in addition to that, we already cover children from birth to 18 under the regular Medicaid program that undocumenteds qualify for, that the state picks up half of those costs. And also, all undocumenteds that go through the emergency room, half of that cost is paid for by Illinois taxpayers, regardless of their age. And so the number that we're providing for health care alone is well in excess of $1 billion a year, which is something that our budget can't handle. And at a time when our disabled community, our seniors, our veterans are all struggling with affordability of their health care, for the state to be spending this kind of money to provide this kind of care is not right. And again, we believe this is something that, one, should be addressed at the federal level, either close the border, or the federal government should be paying for this health care, not asking Illinois taxpayers to pay this huge number that is growing each day as more and more come into the state. So that's a concern that, that we have and that we believe needs to be addressed. And this legislation is one of those that sends a message that Illinois is not the sanctuary state to come to for free health care from residents from over 100 different countries that come here, knowing that, as I said, up until January, Illinois was the only state that provided broad health care. And so that unfortunately helped attract a sicker population as well, which again was costing the state taxpayer significant dollars. So thank you for allowing me to talk at least about the health care portion of it. And then I'll introduce Representative Sosnowski.
Thanks so much, and I'll just kind of wrap it up and kind of discuss a local level and how that affects our local communities. Obviously, you know, I don't blame any of the border states, Texas, Arizona, et cetera, that are having migrant issues. When poor federal policy allows hundreds of thousands of individuals to bleed over the borders in a single month, allowing essentially everybody to claim amnesty, you know, that word spreads. And as we've seen, the numbers have continued to tick up year over year due to that bad policy. And what is a state like Texas or Arizona, et cetera, going to do with hundreds of thousands of individuals, again, each month that are coming over? The costs are astronomical. We hear the mayor of Chicago complaining about the tens of thousands that we're working with in Illinois here, and the cost that is associated with that. You know, so that trickle down is an extremely high cost, as was highlighted here with what we're spending here in Illinois, well over $1 billion for services for migrants, illegal immigrants, et cetera, through health care and other things. And as we see that trickle down to the lower level of governments or local communities, number one, are dealing with transportation issues. When we have communities like Rockford that just don't have the services to take in hundreds of individuals, having to bring them to Chicago, but also the surrounding cities in and around Chicago. We've got, you know, thousands of people, children that need services. So what's happening because of our open door policy, you know, these children are now getting into our school systems. That's creating more of a burden on local property taxes for school districts. And you have a lot of those types of demands at all types of levels. And as was very clearly said here, and you know, my colleagues mentioned, you have these policies, word spreads, the numbers continue to increase, and so not only the border community states are sending folks, but people are asking to come to Illinois because of the platinum benefits. Now that hurts our residents because we have Illinois tax-paying residents, 12.5 million or so, that are putting money into our state economy. And those resources are expected to take care of our roads, our bridges, our police, infrastructure, school systems for Illinois residents. And we obviously are one of the highest tax states, as everybody knows, with property taxes and other taxes included. If we would stop spending those dollars on non-resident services, those are dollars that we can open up year over year to drive down costs for our Illinois residents. And that should be our priority. That should be this administration's priority. Appreciate the time. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Chesney to close.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to be here today. You know, the Trust Act is common sense, and so for those that have been critics and suggest that migrants are not illegal immigrants, I think it's also worth noting that about 80% of the applications are going to be rejected. About 80%, that's the average. And when those 80% of folks are rejected, I don't think that many folks believe that they're going to travel back to their home country. I don't think people believe that. And so we need to anticipate that we are going to communicate with federal authorities when the 80% of those applications are anticipated to be rejected. And so that's the important piece of why the Trust Act has to be repealed, because as these asylum seekers have their day in court, if they show up, 80% of those will not be found to have asylum granted. The schools is also very important because, Governor Pritzker and the Democrats aren't talking about the impact on the classroom sizes, the local property tax, some of the highest in the state. They're not talking about having to find non-English speaking teachers or that can speak a second language, ESL teachers. They're not talking about that issue and the impact that it's having and the pressure that's having on our property taxes, because local property taxpayers are going to foot this bill for the migrant crisis that are coming. We're seeing in the city of Freeport, Rockford, they're writing about this issue. They're seeing a significant uptick. And then healthcare. As we've noticed, the best plans that J.B. Pritzker provides are for illegal immigrants. And so we have a couple solutions. I think our hope is that they're going to have traveler's remorse and that the migrants are going to return to their home country. There's proud sanctuary states. Governor Pritzker has talked out both sides of his mouth. I don't understand why he is surprised, that people are wanting to come here and that other governors are sending migrants here. They're doing exactly what J.B. Pritzker campaigned on, right? That's what he has asked them to do, to be a welcoming, empathetic state. But we're seeing the impact of that in every community. And then if you take a look at the temporary shelters, they're putting them in some of the poorest areas in the state. They're not putting these in Lincoln Park or the Gold Coast where the governor and the Democrat donors are. They're putting them where the resources are already very scarce. And that's by design, because the governor doesn't really care. He doesn't care about the migrants. He wouldn't put them in Lincoln Park. Puts them in the poorest of the poorest in the south side of Chicago, where the resources are already spread thin. And so we need to take away the incentives and the welcome mat in this state. And when we do that, what we're going to see is a realignment, and it shouldn't be a controversial issue, that we want to put people that are legal Illinois citizens first. That shouldn't be a controversial issue. We have single mothers that need help. We have elderly, disabled, those that fall in the cracks that can't quite get the government health care that they need, just make a few extra bucks, knowing that an illegal immigrant, a migrant, no copays, best health care you can get, best education you can get, driver's license, legal services. The governor has campaigned on this issue, Democrats have campaigned on this issue, but they won't put the migrants, in most cases, in their communities. You don't see the progressive Democrats that represent wealthy areas ever say, put a temporary shelter here. They always say we need to address the issue as long as it's not where they're at, because it shows where their heart is. They really don't want to address the issue. And they want to say they're a welcoming state, all while they're trying to make it more and more difficult for migrants to come here, which we would agree. But they're talking out both sides of their mouth because Governor Pritzker could hold the Biden administration accountable. The Democrats could put on the pressure to secure our border and to reinstate the stay in Mexico policy on the federal level, but they won't do it.